Long before Europe burned, before the world knew their names, there were two captains standing in the dust at Camp Meade in 1919. George Patton was 33. Dwight Eisenhower was 28. They were part of a forgotten experiment, the Tank Corps, an arm of the Army most generals considered a novelty, a mistake, or a threat to tradition. Patton was already a war hero. Cavalryman. Olympian. Decorated veteran of Mexico and France. Born into wealth and certainty. He spoke like a man who assumed history would make room for him. Eisenhower had no such confidence. He had missed combat in World War I, spent the war training others to fight while he stayed behind. He was smart, disciplined, and invisible. A Kansas farm boy still waiting for proof that he belonged. But when they talked about tanks, something clicked. They agreed on everything that mattered. That speed mattered more than territory. That shock broke armies faster than attrition. That future wars would be won by movement, not trenches. The Army hated those ideas. Superiors warned them to stop writing papers. Stop challenging doctrine. Stop pushing tanks as independent weapons. Patton didn't care. He had money. He had confidence. He would fight anyone. Eisenhower learned something else. He learned when to be quiet. That lesson, when to restrain yourself for survival, would define his life. 23 years later, the quiet captain was supreme Allied commander in Europe, and the loud one was the most feared general in the American Army. Their friendship survived. Everything else changed. Eisenhower now had to manage Patton, to protect him from politicians, to explain him to allies, to unleash him at the right moment, and stop him at the wrong one. Patton hated that. He didn't want to be managed. He wanted to fight. War exposes contradictions. And no contradiction tortured Eisenhower more than Patton. August 1943. Sicily. Patton walks into a field hospital. Sees soldiers suffering from what doctors call combat fatigue. Shell shock. Men shaking, crying, unable to fight. Patton sees weakness. He slaps two soldiers. Calls them cowards. Threatens them. The news explodes. Reporters hear. Senators demand action. The American public is outraged. Eisenhower faces an impossible choice. Fire Patton, and lose the most aggressive battlefield commander he has. Or keep him, and risk political disaster. Eisenhower chooses the narrow path. He reprimands Patton. Forces public apologies. Makes it hurt but not fatal. And then he protects him. Because while politicians debate, Eisenhower is already thinking about France. About Normandy. About how to win a war that will require deception on a scale never attempted. Operation Fortitude. A fake army. Fake radios. Fake tanks. And at the center of it all, Patton. The Germans fear Patton more than any other Allied general. They study his campaigns. They track his movements obsessively. So Eisenhower gives them exactly what they expect. Patton is placed in command of a phantom army group aimed at Calais. He inspects inflatable tanks. Gives speeches. Draws attention. German intelligence takes the bait. They hold their best divisions away from Normandy, waiting for Patton. Patton is furious. He believes he's been sidelined. Humiliated. Eisenhower lets him believe it. Because Patton's reputation, his myth, is saving lives. When Patton finally enters the war in August 1944, he does exactly what Eisenhower always knew he would. He explodes. The Third Army advances faster than any modern force in history. Hundreds of miles. Thousands of prisoners. Entire German formations collapse under the speed. Other generals plan. Patton moves. Eisenhower watches with pride and fear. Because Patton is outrunning supplies. Creating gaps. Forcing coordination problems. Patton demands fuel. Ammunition. Priority. Eisenhower says no. Politics matter. Allies matter. Montgomery demands resources. Market Garden is approved. It fails. Patton fumes. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes. The Germans attack. American lines collapse. Units are surrounded. Command breaks down. Eisenhower calls his generals together. The room is heavy with uncertainty. Then Eisenhower turns to Patton. How soon can you attack? Patton doesn't hesitate. 3 divisions. 72 hours. The room freezes. Patton has already planned this. Eisenhower knows what that means. A complete pivot of an entire army. In winter. Under fire. It sounds impossible. Eisenhower doesn't argue. Make it so. Patton delivers. On December 22nd, exactly as promised, the Third Army slams into the German flank. The bulge collapses. The war is saved. This is the moment. The moment every risk Eisenhower took managing Patton pays off. And still he cannot say it publicly. Not yet. You have to understand what Eisenhower is really doing when he turns to Patton at Verdun. He is not asking for confidence. He is not asking for optimism. He is asking for something no doctrine supports. Because at that moment, December 19, 1944, the Allied front is not bending. It is breaking. Entire American regiments are missing. Telephone lines are dead. Roads are choked with refugees, wrecked vehicles, frozen bodies. The weather has grounded aircraft. Snow is blinding artillery observers. Fuel dumps are captured or burning. This is not a tactical setback. This is a systemic collapse. Every instinct Eisenhower has tells him to slow down, to stabilize, to consolidate, to think politically. And yet he turns to Patton. Because Patton does not think in systems. He thinks in motion. Patton is already moving before the meeting ends. He leaves Verdun and does not sleep. He sits in his command vehicle with maps spread across his knees, recalculating routes in his head while aides shout fuel tallies and road conditions over the engine noise. You have to picture the scale of what he is attempting. 3 divisions. More than 250,000 men. Thousands of vehicles. Hundreds of tanks. All of it pivoting 90 degrees in winter conditions, on roads never meant for this kind of traffic, while still engaged with the enemy. Any delay means German armor reaches the Meuse. Any mistake means chaos. And there is no margin for error. Patton issues orders that break convention. Units disengage under cover of darkness. Supply officers are told to strip depots bare. Fuel is rerouted mid-transit. Traffic control units are placed at every crossroads. Patton personally overrides corps-level hesitation. Move now. Move faster. This is not planning. This is orchestration. You can hear it in the radios. Urgency without panic. Aggression without confusion. Patton does not ask if roads are clear. He asks how long until they are. And when told 3 hours, he says make it 1. German intelligence does not understand what is happening. They expect Allied paralysis. They expect reorganization. They expect delay. Instead, they detect movement, massive, sustained, impossible movement, on the southern shoulder of the Bulge. And they do not believe it. Because no army should be able to do this. By December 21st, Patton's lead elements are in contact. Snow falls sideways. Engines freeze. Men march with rags wrapped around boots. Tank crews light fires beneath engines just to keep oil fluid. You hear artillery again. American artillery. And it is coming from a direction the Germans did not plan for. The relief of Bastogne becomes inevitable, not because of numbers but because of tempo. Patton does not give the Germans time to understand what is happening. Every hour matters. Every mile gained collapses another assumption. And Eisenhower watches it unfold through situation reports that feel unreal. Timelines that should be impossible. Distances covered that should not exist. This is the moment Eisenhower understands something he cannot say. That no one else could have done this. Not Bradley. Not Montgomery. Not any general who required certainty. Only Patton, who thrived in chaos, could turn collapse into momentum. But even now, Eisenhower cannot say it. Not while the war is still being fought. Not while alliances remain fragile. Not while Patton himself remains a problem. Because the same man who just saved the Allied front is still unpredictable. Still abrasive. Still dangerous. And Eisenhower knows something else. Patton does not see this as heroism. He sees it as proof. Proof that he was right all along. That speed wins wars. That caution kills. That politics delays victory. Which makes Eisenhower's next task even harder. Because now he must restrain the man who just made the impossible possible. The advance continues into Germany. Patton keeps pushing. Always pushing. And Eisenhower keeps saying no. No to Berlin. No to unilateral moves. No to ignoring occupation agreements. Each no deepens the fracture. Patton believes Eisenhower is betraying opportunity. Eisenhower believes Patton would shatter the alliance if unchecked. They are both right. And that truth sits between them like a live grenade. Then the war ends. And the rules change overnight. The aggression that was essential becomes dangerous. Patton's bluntness becomes scandal. His instincts become liabilities. And Eisenhower, once again, must choose the alliance over the man. Patton is removed. The decision is correct. And it breaks something permanent. Because this time, Patton is not coming back. If you find these moments of command, where victory hangs on decisions no one can admit, as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit the subscribe button. These stories of genius, restraint, and impossible choices deserve to be remembered. Victory has consequences. When the war ends, Patton becomes a liability overnight. He speaks carelessly, talks about former Nazis, about fighting the Soviets next. In peace, Patton is dangerous. Eisenhower knows it. And this time there is no war to justify protecting him. Patton is relieved. The demotion hurts more than any enemy fire. Their last conversations are strained. Then, December 1945. A car accident. 12 days later, Patton is dead. And something changes. For the first time since 1942, Eisenhower does not have to measure his words. In private letters. In conversations with aides. In reflections never meant for headlines. He admits the truth. That Patton was indispensable. That no one else could do what he did. That when chaos reigned, Patton thrived. That restraining him was politically necessary, but militarily costly. Eisenhower wonders aloud whether the war might have ended sooner had Patton been unleashed fully. Not because Patton was always right, but because he acted when others hesitated. The ripple is not tactical. It is philosophical. Eisenhower realizes leadership is not about finding perfect men. It is about managing imperfect ones who can do extraordinary things. And sometimes, the cost of managing genius is silence. What Eisenhower does not anticipate is how silent the world becomes after Patton is gone. No more late-night arguments. No more explosive memos. No more commanders forcing him to choose between victory and diplomacy. The war is over. The alliance holds. But something essential is missing. And Eisenhower feels it immediately. Because for the first time since 1942, he does not have a man he can turn to when everything collapses. That realization does not come all at once. It arrives in fragments. In after-action reports. In historical reviews. In quiet conversations with officers who admit, privately, that they waited for Patton's move before making their own. It arrives when Eisenhower reflects on moments where hesitation cost lives. Where speed might have ended fighting sooner. Where political balance delayed military resolution. He begins writing letters. Not speeches. Not memoirs. Private letters. To old friends. To former staff officers. And in those letters the tone changes. The restraint disappears. He admits that managing Patton was the hardest task of the war. Harder than coordinating armies. Harder than appeasing allies. Harder than any battle plan. Because Patton forced him to confront a truth no commander wants to face. That sometimes the man you need most is the one you must constantly restrain. Eisenhower acknowledges something extraordinary. That Patton could do things that could not be taught. Could not be trained. Could not be replaced. Patton operated on instinct sharpened by experience and ego. He sensed weakness. He exploited momentum. He moved when others debated. And in modern war, where speed mattered more than brilliance, that was decisive. Eisenhower also admits something darker. That restraining Patton may have prolonged the war. That decisions made for political harmony came at military cost. He does not regret them. But he recognizes the trade-off. And that recognition haunts him. Because command is not about choosing right or wrong. It is about choosing which cost you are willing to pay. What they did not know then, what history only sees now, is that Eisenhower's greatness lay not in tactics but in burden. He carried the weight of knowing Patton's value while denying it publicly. He protected the alliance by suppressing truth. And only after Patton's death could he finally admit what he had lost. When Eisenhower later writes that Patton was indispensable, the word is precise. It is not praise. It is admission. Indispensable means the outcome changes without him. It means history bends. And Eisenhower, who built his career on balance and restraint, acknowledges that the war's most dangerous weapon was not a tank or an army or an invasion. It was one man's will to move forward when everything else froze. That admission does not diminish Eisenhower. It defines him. Because leadership is not about commanding greatness. It is about containing it, without destroying it. And Eisenhower contained Patton long enough to win the war. But only just. Eisenhower becomes president in 1953. He leads America through the Cold War without firing a shot. But he never forgets Patton. In later interviews, when asked about the war, his voice changes when Patton's name comes up. There is pride. And regret. Because Eisenhower understands something history often forgets. War is not won by safe men. It is won by dangerous ones, guided, restrained, and released at the right moment. Patton was built for war. Eisenhower was built to manage it. Together they were unstoppable. Apart they were incomplete. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these untold truths from the archives. If you want to join us, subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or country, and tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that Dwight Eisenhower, George Patton, and the men who fought under them do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.